Okay, let us all be seated. Hey, so here is the schedule of our webinars. Due to unforeseen events, we made some adjustments in our schedule. So kindly take note of the changes. Okay? So we will have the first session entitled, Do You Want to Build an Archive? An Introduction to Core Archival Functions, to be discussed by Dr. Ira S. Buenrostro Kabab right after this opening program. This will be followed by our next session at 2 p.m. today by Ms. Maria Giselle A. Cruz with her topic, Introduction to Gender Sensitivity for Librarians. Tomorrow, November 11, we will have our morning session with the topic on improving library services using Google Collaborative Tools, to be delivered by Ms. Maricel C. Paya. Finally, on November 12, we will have two topics. In the morning will be how to speak on a digital stage and capture the limelight, to be delivered by our own director, Sir Richard P. Burgos. Finally, in the afternoon, with the webinar entitled Control Your Records Before They Control You, the basics of records management and records control, to be discussed by Mr. Martin Julius B. Perez. Okay, so as we go along with this webinar, kindly take note of these house rules. Okay, keep your microphones on mute. For our Zoom participants, please use the Q&A feature for questions. This can be found at the lower right corner for laptop users, while for mobile phone users, it is found at the upper right corner. You may chat with your questions while the talk is ongoing. While for our Facebook live streaming viewers, you may just comment your questions. This will be consolidated and answered by our speakers in the Q&A portion. Okay, and then be polite, pay attention, and actively participate. We will be asking you to fill out a feedback or evaluation form at the end of each session in exchange for your e-certificate. And the whole duration of the webinar series is recorded. Okay, so kindly go to menti.com again, and then share screen na lang. Okay. And then you will be answering the question, what type of library are you in? Okay. Or what type of library are you affiliated with? Okay. Sige. Ayan po. Okay, so the code is 6368633. Hey, for our FB live streaming viewers, hello sa inyo lahat dyan. Huwag po kayong mahihiyang mag-chat ng questions. Okay, so we have from academic libraries, okay, from special libraries, we also have from law libraries. Okay, we have here from special government libraries. We have here from the Gupan City Public Library. Okay. Okay, so our participants for this webinar are from east to west, north to south, from the different provinces of the Philippines. And we hope that we have our international friends present with us today. They actually registered, but it might be because we have a different time zone. Baka hindi sila makapag-join. Code, okay, yung code natin is 6368633. That is 6368633. Okay, so we have majority of our participants today are from academic library and school library, followed by special libraries. So, diverse po yung pinanggalingan natin na libraries, and this is nice. Somehow, we will be able to form linkages maybe and our own networks through this webinar series. Okay. So thank you so much for answering. And now, to formally welcome you to this webinar series, we have here with us our supportive division chief of the Information Resources and Analysis Division, Sir Alan Tole. Sir Alan, take it away.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Irene. And on behalf of the Department of Science and Technology, the Science and Technology Information Institute, and STII Director Richard P. Burgos. I would like to welcome you to day one of our three-part webinar series in celebration of the Library and Information Services Month. I won't be introducing any more our featured speakers today because they will be given their own
Okay, Sir Alan? Okay, so medyo mahina po yata yung internet ni Sir Alan. So antayin na lang po muna natin. Saglit lang po. And then while we're waiting for Sir Alan, we will continue with the Menti.
Kaya nga naputol eh.
Okay lang po ba, sir?
Saan?
Sa baba,
Set up natin sa baba. Paano?
nagtutulong po si Irene ngayon.
Oo.
Mag-entertain yung mga natin, tapos habang i-pressure kayo. Tingnan na lang.
Okay, guys, this is take two for me, and it's always a welcome. It's always a welcome development to reboot ourselves so that we could improve further our delivery, not only of our goods and services, and even our speeches. So, okay, so here's part two. I hope you don't mind. So, on behalf of the Department of Science and Technology, the Science and Technology Information Institute, and STII Director Richard P. Burgos, I would like to welcome you to day one of our three-part webinar series in celebration of the Library and Information Services Month. As we all know, Library and Information Science, or LIS, started with library science, a field which seeks to organize and provide access to collections of knowledge, which for centuries existed nearly exclusively in book and manuscript form. As such, library science dealt with classification systems, the best practices for cataloging print resources, and bibliographic history, with the first method introduced in Columbia University by Melville Dewey, whose method is still the gold standard today. Now, over time, the study of library science expanded and became more and more interdisciplinary when library science scholars began seeking answers to important questions regarding society's information needs and behavior. And as a result, slowly but steadily generated a large output of research. So, among the fields that push the boundaries of this study to new unexplored horizons is information science. This convergence of library and information science has pushed the field toward a more integrative approach that will continue as we also continue to collect and make available knowledge holdings in digital formats. Library and information science is a profession that is full of people passionate about making a positive change in the world, and they tend to be wildly happy about what they do. Librarians bridge the gaps that exist between people, information, and technology. In their professional lives, librarians and information professionals work to, number one, design and develop knowledge organization systems. Number two, create readers' advisory resources to encourage young students to develop a lifelong love of learning and reading. Number three, help scholars locate archival and other resources crucial to their work. Number four, identify sources of assistance in family and personal crisis. And number five, help doctors more quickly locate health information in critical situations. And that is how it is in our work here at DOST STII. We are the only agency mandated to maintain a library throughout the entire DOST system. And we are continually challenged to make our library relevant and useful in today's interconnected information world. As such, we have been proactive in our efforts to reinvent and reposition our own library. Thus, it is important that for the 30th staging of the annual Library and Information Science Month, we have chosen the theme Librarial, which could be envisioned as libraries relate, engage, advocate, lead from the four letters that compose the word real. As LIS professionals, we must be able to relate the first word, the library's complete range of services, and make them accessible and relevant to the new and increasing demands of today. Through our own efforts in applying our knowledge and expertise to meet the demands of today, we ourselves become agents of change. We must also be ready at all times to engage, the second letter, in order to draw constituents, stakeholders, and nearby communities in order to draw interest and in the process garner their support for our libraries. Let us stand up and advocate A, the third letter, the importance of libraries as a source of accurate, curated knowledge and information, and is thus recognized for its formative role under the United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Goals and integrated into the medium-term Philippine Development Plan from 2017 to 2022. Finally, LIS professionals must show the way and lead, the last letter, in an environment conducive to innovation, empowerment, creativity, and intellectual freedom. And with that, I would like to welcome you all to our webinar series. May you find this activity a most informative and fruitful experience. Thank you and good day to all.
Okay, so thank you very much, Sir Alan, for that informative, inspirational, and very warm welcome. So indeed, we librarians and other library professionals bridge the gaps that exist between people, information, and technology. So sabi nga ni Sir kanina, we have to be real. And we have real R would mean relate. We have to relate the library's complete range of services and make them accessible and relevant to the new and increasing demands of today, most especially for the setup of the educational system. No? And then the next letter is E, which is engage. And the third letter is to advocate. And the last but not the least, which is L, is for us to lead in an environment conducive to innovation, empowerment, creativity, and intellectual freedom. Okay? So, we will now proceed to our first session. Make sure you are comfortable enough to stay awake for the whole duration of our webinar. Our first speaker finished her PhD in Information Studies in March 2019 from Wee Kim Wee School of Communication and Information at the Nanyang Technological University, or NTU, where she was a recipient of NTU Research Scholarship. She obtained both her degrees in Bachelor of Library and Information Sciences cum laude and Master of Library and Information Science with specialization in archival studies from the University of the Philippines, Diliman in 2005 and 2010 respectively. She is a licensed librarian and placed fourth in the 2005 licensure examination for librarians in the Philippines. She joined the academy in 2006, and at present, she is an assistant professor at the UP School of Library and Information Studies, where she teaches LIS and archival studies courses, both in the undergraduate and graduate levels. She has been and is currently involved in projects related to education and training of librarians, archivists and record managers, establishment and management of record centers and archives, and preservation of historical records. Her research interests include the development of archival theory and practice, the politics of libraries and archives, and the role in the information of collective memory, the use, contextualization, and preservation of archives such as photographic records and Filipiniana historical sources, and qualitative research methods in LIS. Please welcome Dr. Ira Buenrostro Cabab.
Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Ira Benrasa Kabab and I am an assistant professor at the UP School of Library and Information Studies. Thank you DOST for the invitation and happy LAS month to everyone. So today we're going to talk about how to build an archives and core functions or the core archival functions that we need to know before we start building archives. I know that you have many questions as regards the factors or the primary considerations that you have to know when you are to build an archival repository. So let's try to answer those questions and let's try to know the basic things that you have to understand first before building or establishing an archives. But before anything else, I'd like to ask, how are you? How is everyone? I know that it is a very challenging time. We have a pandemic, and we do not know until when do we have to stay at home or until when do we have to limit our physical movements and avoid social gatherings. But yeah, I hope everyone is well. I hope everyone is healthy and doing great. This is a very challenging time, and yes, let's do this together. I know that we can overcome this pandemic, this challenge. And it's almost Christmas. I know that you have your countdown before approaching Christmas. And I know that many of you may start decorating their houses with Christmas decorations. You are building you're putting up your Christmas tree or putting up your lanterns in your houses. If maybe some of you would want to build a snowman, but obviously we can't build a snowman here in the Philippines because we won't have a winter. But well, we cannot build a snowman, but we can build an archives, and that's what we'll try to do after this session. Or maybe you are planning or you're already doing an archives or building an archives already. Okay, so let's begin building archives. Okay, so what do we have to know or what do we have to do when we are building an archives? So, before anything else, there are things that you have to understand when you are to build an archives. Okay, so you need to understand the basic definitions of archives, and this is it. Okay, it's from the Greek word archeon, which means government or government house or something that belongs to an office. So during the ancient times, when they said archives, it's about government archives. It's something that belongs to the office. So it's about public and official records. But of course, as time went by, the definition of archives has changed. So when you say archives, it could be the records that have enduring value, and it could also be the facility where the records are stored, or the organization or agency that is responsible for the records and the facility. So when you say archive, so we have three basic definitions. It could be the material itself, it could be the place where the material is being preserved, or it could be the agency or organization responsible for the preservation and maintenance of the material. So maybe you are quite confused. Okay, is archive or archives plural or singular? It's fine. It's totally fine. Archives could be plural or singular. It doesn't matter. In some literature and also in practice, when you say archive, it's a collection managed as a unit. So it's a group of records or fonts that has similar functions or similar provenance or similar source. So that's the definition or the basic definition of archives. I hope you get a grasp of it. So it's quite easy to understand. Okay, one of the things that you have to remember is that archives is not a repository of old and unused documents. Okay, I know that you have heard about archives being a collection of old and dusty records, but please, please do not have that kind of mentality that when you are dealing with archives, you have that kind of feeling that, okay, I am dealing with old records or dusty documents or dead files. So archives, again, based on the definition that I presented a while ago, it's a record or a group of records that have permanent or enduring value. It means that we put value to the records, we assign value to the records, or even the records have their own inherent value. So do you think that archives are just a collection of old, dusty, and useless documents, or a bodega or a storage of things that you are not planning to use for a long time? So actually, archives is um, it's really a group of important records, just like what I said earlier. And when you deal with archives, or when you are to build an archival repository, you have to think about this core archival functions. So these core archival functions are the selection and acquisition, the arrangement and description, the reference, access and outreach, and preservation. The core archival functions are basically the things that you have to do when you are building an archives. Whether the archives is a digital repository or an institutional repository or a physical repository for your physical records. So whatever archives that you want to build, you have to do this core archival functions. Many archivists or many practitioners working in the archives, I'm sure they have been doing this, but maybe they are not aware that they're already doing this for archival functions. Even in the theory and practice and even education of records managers and archivists, these core archival functions are the things that they have to learn and need to practice, and also even to theorize. But we won't be discussing the theories related to these archival functions. We'll be more practical during this section. So let's begin with this one. The first core archival function, which is the selection and acquisition. Selection and acquisition is very important because this is like the start of your core collection, or if you are working in the library, I'm sure you are very familiar with collection development or how to create collection development policy. So in archives, you also do that. We select and we acquire materials, and that is one of the first or one of the very important steps in building an archives. Okay, so when you say archival selection, so they say that archival selection is, I think this is, again, this is the first task, and at the same time, this is the most challenging task for the archivist because it involves what? A process by which archivists identify, appraise, it's in the slide, and accession records of enduring value that fulfill their institution's legal mandate or other acquisition goals. So again, as I mentioned earlier, this is the beginning of everything. This is the beginning of your archives because you as the archivist and also your institution will have to decide which record should be included in your archives. Because if you will not be including the material, it means that you are excluding something, right? So if you have already excluded a material in your archives, touch moves na yun, di ba? So you might think that, oh my God, I just de-accessioned or I just weeded out an important material because I did not do selection or I did not do proper appraisal. Okay? So when you do archival selection, there are three important steps that you have to remember. The first one is appraisal. I already said that earlier. The other one is acquisition and then accessioning. So when you do appraisal, it means that you are identifying and assigning values of records. So you will see if a certain record has financial value or administrative value or even personal or symbolic value and also archival value, of course. And then acquisition is the second step. Okay, so you have to know whether a certain material having this value will be acquired or will be selected for your archive. Okay, and then the third one is accessioning. So when you say accessioning, it's about recording or documenting the added new items, or you have already officially added a material to your archive. So the first step for your selection is what? You do the appraisal, you identify the value of the record. Okay, so this one has financial value, then maybe we can keep this permanently, or um, we can check periodically whether this material still has value, then maybe we can then read it out after some time. And then for the acquisition, so after you appraise them, or after you appraise the material, you will acquire it. And then, okay, this is the material that I think should be included in the archive, then yeah. Then the third one is accessioning. So when you say accessioning, you are officially owning or you are officially including a material to your archive. So accession is like accession number. So if you're working in the library, so I'm sure you are familiar with accessioning or the accession number that you are assigning to each material that would help you with your inventory, right? So it also applies to archival materials. So you do the appraisal, you assign the value or you identify the value, and then you acquire them, acquire the material, and then you accession them or you officially record that you already own a certain material. Okay? So what do you need to consider when doing archival selection? Of course, the first one is your purpose. Why are you doing this? Or why do you have to acquire a certain material? So sometimes you will be having some existential crisis with that. Like, okay, why am I doing this? Why am I acquiring a certain record series, for instance? So you also have to consider your institutional goals, especially if you are working in an institutional archive or an organizational archives. So you should ask your administrators, or maybe you should ask some of your colleagues, like, okay, so what do we intend to collect? What is the narrative that we'd like to have when we build an archives? What kind of story would you like to reflect or represent when you have this core collection of your materials? So you also have to know the mandates of your institution. For instance, if you are a public archives or a government archives, obviously you are mandated to collect records representing your institution. At the same time, you are mandated to collect records or keep records for transparency and also for sound decision making. So you have to know these institutional goals and mandates aside from the purpose why you are collecting or why you are selecting archival materials for your archives. Then the third one is the administrative considerations. Okay, so the administrative considerations include the money, the space, and um, staffing considerations, like are there available items or positions for records managers and archivists, or even personnel who will be in charge of archives. So these are the administrative considerations that you should know before you even establish or start collecting archival materials. Most of the time, when people would ask me or would ask our office, the UPS Alliance, what to do when they want to establish an archive for their school or for their church or for their organization. These are the first things that we ask them. What is your purpose? Why do you want to establish your archives? What are your goals and your institutional mandates? And then how much effort are you willing to exert or to put in this project? And then the fourth one is time. How much time do you have? How much time are you willing to spend for the establishment of the archives, and how much time are you willing to spend to start collecting, arranging, and processing all these records and all these materials? And also, time is aside from that, you also have to know the time span, like from what year to what year will be covered by your collection. I mean, if the time span of that will be covered by your collection will just run from 1900s to, let's say, pre-war, then or 1945, 1943, around that time, then you should focus your acquisition policy and your selection policy on that time span. Then again, that would go back to your purpose and then your institutional goals and mandates. Like, what are the things that you have and need to collect based on these things, right? So and then, so aside from that, so you have the purpose, you have the institutional goals, the mandates, the administrative considerations, and of course the time. then you will decide on the value and worth of the materials. So it's not really a yes or no task. Like, okay, this is valuable, this is not valuable. Okay. So you should be consulting with your colleagues. You should be consulting with other members of your institutions. You should be consulting experts as regards the identification of value and worth of materials. So there's no need for you to work alone in the archives. Well, even though if you're the only one or the only person who will be starting this project, this archival project, you still need some help from your colleagues, from your boss, or from previous employees, and even experts, right? So that you can efficiently, effectively, and also appropriately select materials and appraise materials for your archives. Okay? Another consideration is the use and access. Okay, the use and access is, well, it's very important because what's the use of putting an archive or gathering materials if you will not make them accessible, right? Um, Sometimes it's really difficult because especially for some people who would ask for advice or from us, like, okay, we want to preserve these materials, but we don't want them to be accessible to others. So we would be like, okay, so how much access restrictions are you planning to put for your materials? Okay, how do you intend to use the materials that you're going to select and preserve for in your archives? So the use and access are very important because that would really make you make those important decision points, not just for the selection, but also for the other archival functions that we will discuss later, okay? And especially preservation. So speaking of preservation, so you have the use and access, and now the preservation requirements. So the preservation requirements would be determined based on the material that you will be selecting, and also with the kind of repository that you envision to have. Okay, so the preservation requirements of different materials should always be considered because the preservation requirements of paper would be different from AV materials or even digital materials, obviously. So when you are trying to collect different types of materials for your archives, you have to consider again the time, the value and worth of these materials that you are attempting to collect, the use and access or the access restrictions, and of course the preservation requirements of each of the materials that you intend to collect or that you are trying to preserve. Because you have to ask yourself, if these are the preservation requirements, can we do this or can we follow the appropriate standards? Can we follow the guidelines set by international organizations, international institutions regarding preservation? So do we have the money to do it? Do we have the right person to do the preservation or even the conservation treatments for our materials? So you need to think all these things. And then lastly is the donor agreements. Okay, because you will be selecting, appraising, and acquiring materials for your archives, especially for collecting archives, you have to know the donor agreements or what the donors want. Especially if you're looking for or soliciting collections or materials from different donors, let's say in a community. So you have to know whether they would want the materials to be with you forever, or would they want the materials that they're donating to have some access restrictions, or they would want you to get the materials, but you need to digitize them and then give them the digitized copy. So um, there are some agreements between the donor and you as an institution who that will be receiving these materials. So these are the things that you need to think about. And also you need to list down before you actually acquire materials to your archives. So the question now is, should I include everything? Ah, as much as I want to say, yeah, you can, go ahead. In reality, no, right? You cannot include everything. That is why you have to do appraisal. That's why you have to do these strategies, the things that I shared with you earlier, because you cannot include everything. According to Vernon Harris, who's an archival scholar, archives are basically slivers and slivers, or slivers of reality. You cannot include everything in the archives. As much as you want to preserve everything, it's almost impossible. First of all, it's impossible to have all the things at the same time. Secondly, it's really expensive. And thirdly, um, it's practically impossible. Yeah, as much as I want to include everything, in reality, it's really difficult. But if you can, then go ahead. But again, you have to follow this. You have to follow your acquisition policy. So you already have the first considerations before you appraise or before you actually select and acquire the materials. Then you should draft this one. You should have this one, the acquisition policy, because this will help you define what records to keep or prioritize. Again, since you cannot keep everything, it's expensive, it's time consuming, you don't have enough space, you're the only one in the archives who will be collecting, selecting, preserving, and processing all these materials. How could it be possible, right? So, in your acquisition policy, it will help you identify which is which, right? And it also provides guidelines in acquiring, appraising, and also preserving records. So this policy is basically the mandate of your agency. It will be like the backbone or the framework of your entire archives. So for instance, this would be really helpful if some people would insist to give their collection to you, but you think, as an archivist, you think that collection is not really fitted for your archives, then you can say that, I am so sorry, but this is what our acquisition policy is saying. We cannot accept your collection, and we're not a bodega, actually. No. We're not a bodega, we're not a storage room, and this is what we're collecting based on our acquisition policy. So most of the time when organizations ask for advice, again, so we ask them about, what do you want to collect, what is your purpose, your mandate, how much time do you have, um, the preservation requirements, the use and access, and also if there will be some donations that will be gathered or that will be received from people. So the next step is that we advise them to come up with acquisition policies. So sometimes we draft acquisition policies for them, and then they review the policy and then see if the acquisition policy is appropriate for their organization. But then again, of course, what we can do as consultants, or if you are, for example, you will be asking help from your colleagues, they will be giving just suggestions, right? But these suggestions will be finalized by you as the archivist or you as the administrator. So this policy is very important and should not be taken for granted. Because most of the time, whenever we build archives, we're just so happy to have this physical collection and that's it. And then we forget about this formal documentation, which is the acquisition policy, and we forget about documenting what we have received so far or what we have accessioned so far, and we take this for granted. Or sometimes, if we have an acquisition policy, we do not revise it or we do not revisit it. Or you have the acquisition policy and it has been like what, 10 years before you revisit or revise it. So so my advice would be, when you draft this acquisition policy, you ask suggestions from your colleagues or from your administrators or experts, and then yeah. So once you have it, then you should include a clause in the policy that you have to revisit or revise the policy periodically, like every 5 years or every 2 years. It's up to you. Okay. So here's an example of an acquisition policy. It's kind of small. So, but basically, what it contains are the whys, the whos, and the whats, right? So why are we collecting records? Whose records are we collecting? And then which records should be collected for permanent preservation? And these are very helpful because um, even though even if you leave your archives, for example, at least the person who will be in charge or will be again in charge of the archives will have some guidelines on what to collect and why collect these materials. So if you want to look at this example, you can visit the UK National Archives, and then yeah, they provide a very good example, a very nice example of a records collection policy. Okay, so aside from that, record schedule. I think this one will be discussed by another speaker. I don't know if probably I'm not sure if when he is going to have his talk. Is it in the afternoon? But anyway, yeah. So the record schedule is another important thing aside from the acquisition policy. Okay. So the record schedule is also known as this disposal schedule or the record schedule, records retention schedule, or the transfer schedule. So this is a document that identifies and describes the records of your organization. And it also gives you like a timeline, the timeline of the life of your records. So whether your record will be disposed of after some time, so the life cycle of your records will be highly dependent again on the value of the records that you have assigned earlier, and this will be translated to the record schedule that you need to come up with. So again, aside from the acquisition policy, you have to come up with a record schedule. Okay. And then accessioning is another documentation. So you already have 3 documents here. So you have what? The acquisition policy, the record schedule, and then the accession record. So once you have this accession record, this would be like an official documentation of the things or the materials that you have officially acquired or added to your archives. So since this is a documentation, these are the things that you need to include in your accession record. So you should include information about the record itself, like the contents, like the location, the provenance or the source, and of course, our analysis and recommendations, some reviews, conditions concerning the transfer, and some legal documentation. And also, if you have the transfer receipt, especially if the material comes from one repository and then it was transferred to you, then that documentation should also be included in your accession record. So the second one is, okay, you're done with the acquisition of records, right? Now, you have to arrange them. You have to describe them. So you need to organize these materials because after acquisition, your work doesn't stop. It won't stop there. You need to organize your materials. So in library, we have cataloging and classification. In archives, we have arrangement and description. So what do we do here? So in arrangement and description, of course, as I said earlier, it involves organization of materials. So when you say arrangement, it is the physical order, or you're putting physical order to your materials. You're like physically arranging them. When you say description, this is the intellectual order, or you do intellectual description, intellectual context to your archival records. So arrangement and description are highly context-based. So usually when we say arrangement, we maintain the original order which the original user or creator used. But when it comes to description, it entails some research because, of course, we're not really following like a cataloging standard for this. But of course, when you are describing a record, you need to read through the context and the content of the record that you are trying to describe. And it's quite difficult because one record may have a lot of details, may have a lot of information, and then it's based on experience. It's quite difficult to really standardize how to describe them. But later on, you will see that we follow certain standards, of course, when we're doing description in the archives. Okay. So for the principles of arrangement, so please, there is really a black and white form for arrangement and description in the archives. I must say that arrangement and description in the archives is they're quite flexible. They're quite flexible, and you may even have your own unique way of arranging and describing your records. But then again, you have to be consistent. You have to be consistent with how you describe and arrange your records in your institution, so that there will be continuity and then also sustainability when it comes to the organization of your records. So there. So these are the things that you need to remember when you are describing or arranging your records. So the first one is the principle of provenance. When you think about the provenance, this is the source, the origin, the creator, or the record group. Okay. So archivists think groups. So we always think about the provenance or the source because we arrange the records based on the source or based on the provenance. So we follow the respect de fonds or the principle of provenance. And then this is what I was mentioning earlier, the regional order or the regional grouping and ordering of records. So we keep order as archivists. So we follow the regional order of records based on how the regional users or how the regional creators arrange their records. For example, I keep my records alphabetically. So once I transfer or donate my personal archives to, let's say, a community archives, then that community archive should follow the principle of provenance, meaning that my collection should not be mixed with other collections, or my collection would not be mixed with other creators or record groups. So that's the principle of provenance. So when we say original order, as I said earlier, I used to keep my records alphabetically. So in the archives, the archivist should maintain that original order, and then my records, therefore, should be kept or should be arranged alphabetically. So, so I hope you can visualize it, but here, so let's see some examples. Okay, so for the levels of arrangement, okay, so we follow this from general to specific. So we have the repository, the fonts, the record group or the subgroup, then another level, the record series or subseries, or the filing unit, and then the next level would be the item or the document. So again, the idea here is that you arrange your records from general to specific. Okay? So one example would be here. So for example, we have the repository here, the local government archives, or the fonts would be the Office of the City Mayor. Under the Office of the City Mayor, you have the city ordinances. Under that would be the city ordinances in 2020. Then after that, the city ordinances in February 2020. And then after that is the single item or the individual city ordinance. So as you can see here, it's general to specific. So you are arranging them based on that level. So as you can see here, the repository and also the fonts, the record group, and the subgroup, they're based on what? The provenance, right? The provenance, like what I mentioned earlier, right? We are not mixing this record with the other records. We are not mixing the records of the Office of the City Mayor with the Office of the City Vice Mayor, okay? Because you are maintaining the provenance. We are following the principle of provenance here because we need to preserve or we need to maintain the origin or the source. So now the next levels would be the record series, the files, the items. As you can see here, they're all based on function. Okay? So starting from the record series up to the item level, you can see here that the functions are being considered because, for example, the record series or the sub-series city ordinances. So all the city ordinances have their own function, right? Have the same function. So all the city ordinances will be grouped together and then they will be subdivided according to what? According to year, according to month, and there you go. But basically, it's about the function. So I hope you're seeing here the how the provenance and how the regional order and levels of arrangement are being used for the levels of arrangement. Okay, so for the principles of description, it's really this one is really important because you cannot really access your records without knowing what they have or without knowing what kind of resource it is. So description helps you identify correct information and also the context of the materials that you are holding or you are processing. So, as I said earlier, description and even arrangement in the archives may be really flexible and you may have your own unique way of describing your archives. Unlike in the libraries, right? We're very standardized and we really need to follow these rules. In archives, of course, we follow rules, but you can have your own way of describing your archives. So you can have some narratives. You can decide on the fields of information that you want to include in your descriptive media. So it's up to you. But basically, we follow the ICG. So if you're having a hard time looking for the exact fields of information that you will be using for your description, so you can use the ICG. And I also included here some examples and a list of standards for archives that you can use. You can visit that website, and it has a compilation of the resources and the standards that can be used for archival description. So I hope this would be helpful. Okay, so we're done with the acquisition. So you have your collection because you're done with praising it. You have your acquisition policy, okay, and then you have your record schedule, and then you're done organizing the materials. You have your description or descriptive media. And then now, of course, this is the fun part, right? This is like the showtime of your archival function because you're done with acquiring your materials, you're done with the organization and description, and now it's showtime, right? So you will be making your materials available for use. You will make your materials accessible, and you may step further because you may want to do some outreach activities in your archive. So again, this is your showtime, right? So I think this is one of my favorite parts. Yeah, reference service. Because I like talking to people. So the reference service for me is yeah. I think this a neglected actually this is a neglected function in the archives because most of the time we're very much particular with preservation and organization of resources, but when it comes to reference service, sometimes we tend to be really shy or we tend to be really we're not so sure about our collection, and yeah, intimidated by our collection, intimidated by our users. So don't be like that. So enjoy reference service because reference service again is the showtime, and then this is the time that you will be providing information from and about your collection. So of course, when you do your reference service, you have to know your collection very well. But of course, you know your collection because you're the one who acquired it, you're the one who processed it and described it, right? So I think you're the right person to really render good reference service because you know your collection very well. So I underlined the words user and feedback here. Okay, when making reference requests, either in person or over the telephone to a reference librarian or archivist, or to an information retrieval system, a user will refine his or her search request several times depending on the feedback from the person or the system. So I deliberately underlined user and feedback because when you do reference service, these are the things that you always need to remember. You are serving your users. Okay? You have to deal with your users, and your the behavior of your users would actually depend on the information that you would be giving them, or even the feedback that you are giving them. So it's reference service is a two-way communication, so you really need to understand your user needs and even their wants, and you should be giving out appropriate feedback and results to your users. Okay, so that is why reference interview is really important, because this is the time that you are negotiating with your users. Okay, so it's not really a negotiation between you, the archivist, like the mediator, no? The mediator between the users and the collection in your repository. And then again, you are the expert here. You're the one who knows your collection, so you should be a good mediator, and you're like the bridge between the collection and the potential use of this collection and your users. Okay, and I hope you will enjoy your reference service as much as I do. And of course, outreach. Outreach. Well, not all archives have outreach activities, but if you can, it would be nice, because this again based on the definition of Society of American Archivists, this is a time that you are trying to provide services to your communities, and also you're trying to even tailor or customize services based on the actual needs of your users. Okay, so you can also do some activities like workshops. You can produce your publications and other educational programs so that you can help your community of users or even your potential users, and also your organization, and maximize the use of your archives so that you could address their needs. So outreach is also associated with advocacy. There are a lot of advocacy programs in the archives, and if you check the internet, you can see that if the archives abroad have a lot of projects and initiatives that help those in the marginalized communities, those that have been neglected by traditional archival practices, or even those that have not been even entered archives, right? So immigrants, for example, the LGBT. So there are a lot of advocacy and outreach projects that you can think of when you are um, building, or if you are maintaining an archives. And again, it's part of the reference service and outreach and advocacy. And again, personally, I this is one of my favorite archival functions, because archives is about reaching out to people, reaching out to more people. So you should not just be on top of the ivory tower. You should not just be selecting and acquiring and preserving records, and that's it, but you should bring the archives closer to the people through these activities. And you should always think about how can you help people through the use of records. So the next one is, of course, access, right? So when you do reference services, outreach activities, and advocacy projects, uh, you should think about the access, like how are you going to make these materials more accessible to others? But then again, when you are providing access to materials, you also have to think about different restrictions, right? Especially the privacy and confidentiality of people who may be involved or subjected or being used as subjects by the records. So you should maintain a good balance between the two. That you want to make your records accessible for use, and at the same time, you have to protect the confidentiality and privacy of some people who do not want to be recognized or do not want to be um, identified in your records. So when you do access, you provide access through the use of different materials, so through the use of different media like your catalogs, your indexes, finding aids, and other tools. And also, when you say access, it's about the permission that you can give to your users to physically and intellectually access and use the records in your repository. So again, as I said earlier, you have to maintain a good balance between the two, that you will be making your materials accessible for use, and at the same time, you have to know if there are access restrictions that are needed to be in place to protect privacy and confidentiality of people, no, or some groups, especially nowadays that we are following or we need to follow the Data Privacy Act. Okay, so according to International Organization for Standardization, or the ISO 15489, access to records may be restricted to protect the family. Again, I said this several times already. It depends on the personal information and privacy concerns and privacy matters, and also the intellectual property rights and commercial confidentiality. Some security property, especially for the physical and financials, of course. For example, if you're working in the bank archives or financial archives, obviously the value of these records um, have probably have monetary impact or financial impact. So therefore, you should be protecting those. And of course, state security and other legal and other professional privileges. So that's why in the very beginning, from the start, like from the acquisition level or in the selection level, you should know the access restrictions already. You should know the legal mandates of your institution and also the donor agreements between you, the archivist or the institution, and the donors who would be giving out their collection. Okay? And again, to protect you, just like the acquisition policy, to protect you, your collection, and also the mandate of your institution, you must have this one, the access policy. It's a written documentation or it's an official statement um, that will help you identify or that will help you defend yourselves why you have this access restrictions. So again, they should be in writing and should be made available to users and potential users. So this could also include how you want your materials in the archives should be cited or quoted or recognized, or you can include some statements on reproduction, like can they photocopy it or can they have a digital copy of this material, or how many pages can I um, can I access uh, can I access or can I photocopy or can I take a photo on. So yeah, so these are the things that you have to include clearly in your access policy. Okay, again, I'm sure that you're thinking about, okay, so how can I draft my access policy? So here you go. So here's an example set by the International Council on Archives. So this one is a very good example again because this provides concrete guidelines for archival access. So it includes how to draft your access policy, the access restrictions and decisions that you will be doing or you will be making for your archives, and also how will you administer access or different levels of access for your archives. Okay, there you go. And this one is really nice, right? It even has a sample decision chart so that these steps can help you identify the different types or levels of access that you can provide for your users. Okay, and here there's also a sample withdrawal sheet, again for the access or restriction set for some items in the archives. Oh, we're down to our last one, last core archival function. Okay? Yeah. So preservation, I know that many of you are quite curious about this core archival function because of course we cannot explain everything here. We only have a limited time. But again, yes, archiving has always been equivalent to preservation. So when you talk about access, it's always like that. Okay, so you're an archivist, so you know how to preserve it. Or you're an archivist, so you should be um, really knowledgeable and skilled with what? Um, Skilled in preservation techniques. So, but of course, um, it takes a lot of practice, of course, and training for you to really know the things that you need to do, especially when it comes to conservation and restoration. I myself, I am not a conservator. I'm not a professional conservator, but so sometimes if there are materials that are deteriorating or that have been deteriorated for a long time and they may need professional conservation uh, techniques or even restoration. So I entrust these materials to the right people. So I don't really want to do some techniques or some strategies on materials that I'm not very familiar with. But for now, what we can do or what we should know is that um, there are different ways. There are a lot of ways actually to do preservation or to do preventive conservation so that we can prolong the life of our materials. So if when in doubt, ask an expert. Okay. So if you think that your book or the manuscript is beyond repair, if it needs rebinding, if it needs sometimes they bleach the materials. I'm quite afraid with bleaching. So let the restorators or let the conservators do their job so they can do it for you. Okay? So, but now let's go to the preservation or the active preservation that, again, as you said earlier, the things that we can do to protect our materials from further deterioration. So according to Society of American Archivists, so this is a professional discipline of protecting materials by minimizing chemical and physical deterioration and damage to minimize the loss of information and to extend the life of cultural property. So when you say preservation, it's not it's minimal intervention actually, and you'll see why. Then why preserve? Why do we have to know these things? As I said earlier, when you say archivist, archiving, it's always equivalent to preservation. So why do we have to do this? Why do we need to have this core archival function? So the first one is, of course, to make the records in collection more accessible and usable for a longer period of time. From the very beginning, I already said this in your appraisal, in your selection, we always emphasize use and access. Okay? So how do you plan to make your materials accessible? How do you plan your materials to be available for use? So these are the things that you will be considering even from the beginning of your core archival functions. So when it comes to preservation, it is an important consideration as well because we do preservation because we want to make our materials accessible for use for a longer period of time because preservation or preserving something without thinking about how you're going to use it in the future is going to be really useless. Okay, you're going to spend a lot of money and effort for preservation work, yet you do not have any plan to make your materials accessible. So, but there are some people or some organizations who do that because they just want to preserve materials, but they don't want to make these materials accessible for use. So there are different preservation requirements for that. So again, we compromise and then, yeah, so let's just meet again in the middle and see your goals and purpose. Going back to our first point again, why do you have to do this and what is the purpose of your archives or why do you want to collect these materials? So the restorative treatments, again, as I said earlier, are more difficult and expensive than preventive measures. That's why, as archivists, you should be doing preventive conservation or the preventive measures rather than doing restorative work when it's already a bit too late, right? So you have to think about this. Like, okay, prevention is better than cure. Preservation work or preventive measures is they're actually better, cheaper, and faster than restoration work. Okay, so what are these preventive measures? So good housekeeping, maintaining good environment, okay, proper handling of records, setting appropriate and reasonable access restrictions, especially for physical records, etc., etc. So this again are again better again, and I think they're easier to do than doing restorative treatments. And archival holdings contain, again, important information. The records that you are collecting are not just old, dusty, and useless documents. Archival records are records that have enduring value. Some of them may even have permanent value for others. And this contain important information, your memory, your organizational memory, the history of your community, your society, ourselves, our institutions. So just imagine if you won't be preserving these materials, what will happen to you? So we do preservation work to avoid losing these materials due to neglect or due to premature disposal of records. So premature disposal of records happens when we don't have a correct record scheduling and appraisal. I already mentioned this earlier. And premature disposal of records also happens when people do not recognize the value of the records that they are holding and they're keeping under their custody. Or probably they did not even have the chance to keep them or preserve them because they have prematurely disposed of the records. And that's really sad, right? Imagine all the gems in your collection that can impart important information, memory, history, even feelings and symbolisms, and now they're gone because they were not properly preserved. And that's really scary, right? With all the things happening now in our society. We're looking for truth, we're looking for facts, yet we're not paying attention. We're not paying much attention to our records and archives. And that's the irony of it. So we should start really caring about our archives and we should be really doing preservation work in our own archives. So the last one would be, it's related to the previous point that I was trying to make, is to avoid distortion of facts and collective omission. Especially nowadays, there are a lot of information available, but not all of them are factual information. And I think many of us are looking for the truth and sources that could give us facts. And these records, or the archival records that we're trying to collect and preserve here, can help us build or establish these facts and avoid our society avoid our society and even ourselves to have collective amnesia or to forget what happened in the past or forget the very essence of what should be remembered and what should be established as truth. So that is why preservation work and archival work, they're not just about preserving culture and heritage or your legacy, your institutional legacy, but your work as an archivist has a lot of societal impact, more than you can imagine it. So it's really more about the preservation work. It's really more about the it's really more than about collecting and selecting and organizing these materials, but your work as an archivist is really important in our society. Okay, so when you do preservation, of course, we already know how important preservation work is. So we have to know the main threats to archival materials. So the first one is the nature of the material itself, because as we all know, deterioration of materials is inevitable, so it cannot be avoided. For example, for paper, even though they say that paper may be the most stable, I don't know, the most stable medium for or carrier of the information nowadays, it's the most dependable, it's most widely used, but after some time it will really deteriorate by itself because of the actual or the inherent characteristics or qualities of paper. Paper is made of what? Cellulose fiber. It's made of plants or wood pulp. So it's by nature acidic. So you really cannot avoid um, the effect of acid on paper. So what you can do is that you can just do some or employ some preventive measures so that you can de-acidify or decrease or even halt the the increasing acidity of the paper. But then again, it's really the nature of the material itself, so we cannot avoid it. And the next one is the environment. Yes. So the environment, especially here in the Philippines, or we're a tropical country, um, we're highly humid. Even the international standards for preservation, or even in this how to store your materials in the archives, like the right temperature or the right humidity, sometimes they would not be applicable to our setting in our context in the Philippines because uh, we're so humid. I mean, our temperature is always high, and this kind of environment would entail a different kind of preservation requirements. So what you can do is that you can keep a good microenvironment, and then you should be avoiding what you call it drastic fluctuation in the temperature, and also you have to protect your materials from insects, from pests, and also you have to look after the light or even proper handling, and then you can see it later on. And also the natural and man-made disasters. So aside from the environment, the Philippines is well, we have a lot of disasters, natural and man-made disasters. So for the natural disasters, we cannot avoid it. But of course, since we cannot avoid the natural disasters, what we can do is again preventive measures. So we have to protect again our materials from these natural disasters. And then if you think that your place is um, typhoon prone, then you should know what to do. You should be prepared for it, or you should be somehow placing your archives in a place where it won't get flooded, or you won't be having leaking ceilings, or yeah. And if you think that your place will easily get flooded, then you should not be putting your archives in the basement. So sometimes the common sense will tell you on what to do, but then again, like the acquisition policy, the record schedule, the access policy, you should have your disaster preparedness plan and a documentation of your preservation policy, which is again very important because that will serve as your guide to properly handle disasters and also to properly manage the preservation program of your archives. Then the next one is the way material is handled. Hmm. Because sometimes, even though if you control the environment, you're setting the right temperature, you're setting the right humidity, you're monitoring the, the typhoon, or you're monitoring always the condition of your materials. But then again, the way material is handled is not being monitored, or you have your staff who likes to hold the materials every now and then without proper um, um, protection, or even the your users are not really careful about on how they would handle the materials, then again that is another danger or threat to your archival materials. Okay, so that's why again it's very important for you to have um, a documentation or a writing or a policy that will help you check with yourselves, like, okay, are we doing this or not? Okay, it's like a preservation checklist. So how to begin, right? So how are we going to begin with all the steps that that we're doing or that we're supposed to do in the archives? How do we begin our preservation program? So the first one is, again, you have to check the overall collection of your overall collection. I mean, the overall condition of their collection. Are they okay? Um, when was the last time that you visited, or that you when was the last time that you visited or checked the condition of your collection, the physical condition? Are they getting faded? Are there termites already? Or if you're dealing with, or if you have a digital archive, when was the last time you back it up, or you back up your files? So you have to check the overall condition of the collections, and it's really important that you set periodic inspection of your collection. Okay, and then from that point, you can identify which collections are in particularly poor condition. So sometimes there are some archives and even libraries that would ask us, like, which among here should be preserved first, or which among here should be restored? Obviously, the answer would be which among here is well, has a poor condition. Right? You can easily see it, and which among the collection has the most, or has the highest value. Okay, so you need to do those decisions and then identify which among your collection should be prioritized and should be preserved first. And then which collections, again, are most valuable and important, and yeah, based on your acquisition policy or based on your record schedule, this could be answered, because you can easily tell from these documents which among the records that you are holding are the most important or the most valuable, and which collections are most at risk. Okay, how fast are the collections growing? What direction is collecting likely to take? For example, if you're planning to increase your collection or to acquire more collections, you should really identify whether this is the direction or this is like the goal. Again, going back to your the first step. What is your original goal, or what is your institutional goal? The reason why you are collecting these materials. And then lastly is space available for allocated for future or expanding collections. So do you have the space, whether it's digital or physical space? And also, how much, again, you ask yourselves, how much effort are we willing to exert? And how much time do we have for us to do all this preservation work and acquiring again new collections? So here are the basic archival supplies. I know that not everyone here, or not everyone in here, has the has a laboratory, or maybe some of you may plan to have their own laboratory. So yeah, I'm excited for you. Go for it. So these are the basic archival supplies. I know that it's quite difficult to find like the right chemicals or the right paper for restoration. Yeah, even us, we're having a hard time looking for those. But we just bought these materials from National Bookstore, Daiso, and so, some chemical shop inside the university. So there. And here, as you can see, yeah. So this ones, we bought this from Archival Suppliers. So yeah, they're pretty expensive actually, but you can get discounts, I guess. It's all about negotiation again, people skills. Yeah. So we use this, the Filmoclast P90, for mending tears and torn pages of manuscripts and even books. We also used the pH strips so that we'll identify, we can determine the acidity of paper, and some chemicals for the acidification, for lining and sizing. And that one is it's a it's a spray for the acidification, especially for ink, so those materials that are ink soluble. Okay, so this is, I'm not sure if anyone from this group is participating in this seminar or in this webinar, but yeah. So this was taken in 2013 because a long time ago we had a project and we restored the music manuscripts of some of the national artists for music, and they're keeping these manuscripts at the College of Music Library in UP. So we what we did was, because we didn't have a conservation laboratory, we just created a makeshift laboratory so that we could do some conservation treatments for the manuscripts. And there are quite a lot of manuscripts there, and then it took us how many years to finish everything. And yeah, so we trained these students, the restorators. I'm very proud of them. They're students from the UPS and IS, and I know that some of them are now working in archives. And I'm very happy because they're continuing their archival journey. So this only shows that even though you don't have a laboratory, you can create your own laboratory as long as you have um, that passion and also you have the vision and goal again that you really want to establish an archives and preserve this very important manuscripts. So it's really nice because the students they're not really hard to train, and all of them had already taken archival courses in the undergraduate level, so it was not difficult for them to really learn basic conservation treatments. So it's just basic conservation treatments like acidification, lining, sizing, encapsulation, and that's it. But yes, and it was really a nice experience for me as the project leader and also for the students. So I hope these guys are doing great. So I hope this will inspire everyone here participating in this webinar that you can do it. You can also do it. And but again, if you're in doubt about conservation treatments, do not do it by yourself. So you should ask maybe advice from others, especially those who have been doing conservation treatments. Okay. All right. So before we end, right? It's almost the end. So before we end our webinar on building and how to build an archives, you should always go back to your goal, your purpose. Okay? And one of the goals and one of the purposes why we are building and preserving archives is that we want these materials to be accessible and usable by the current and future generations. What we are building is not just an archives of the past, but this is an archives for the future. What we're building, what we are preserving is not just, all about the materials that we see or we gather from the past, but we are preserving and making this accessible for future use. So always think about that. So whenever you create or come up with a policy or a strategy for your archive, whether it's about preservation, whether it's about arrangement and description, reference and service and access, outreach, advocacy, um, think about this. You should always maintain a good balance between access and use, the preservation, and think about the material and the content and the context. Whenever you are to preserve materials, you should preserve not just the physical material or the materiality of the material or the record itself, but you should also be preserving the content and the context or what the archive is about. Because again, what we are building, what we are creating here is not just something that is brought from the past, but what we are creating and preserving here is something that we want to give to the future generations. So there you go. Building and preserving archives to think about access and use. Huh. So we're done with the core archival functions. Actually, in UP SLIS, this is a 3-unit course, and we're also dedicating how many? I mean, six six units more or 9 units more for to cover everything, to cover all the core archival functions. But we're only doing this for an hour or so. But yeah, but I guess this is actually the like the core or the meat of all the core organal functions. So I hope that you learned something from this. And before anything else, I'd like to ask you again, how are you? I hope that you don't you didn't get information overload. And well, but and if you have questions, do not hesitate to ask me, or you can send me an email. And you can also consult my other faculty members who are also teaching archival studies and records management in UP SLIS. So how are you guys? So I hope you're all okay, you're still listening, and you are learning, we are all learning here. So before I end, I'd like to leave this quote from Mark Green. He was the former president of the Society of American Archivists, and this is what he said. Archivists are professionals who shoulder the power of defining and providing access to the primary sources of history, primary sources that protect rights, educate students, inform the public, and support a primal human desire to understand our past. So again, what we're building is not just an archives or a repository of old documents coming from the past, but these are documents, these are records, these are important materials that we'd like to transmit um, to different generations, to different places, so that we can help other people, we can help communities, and we can protect um, our rights as humans. So let's begin building archives. I know that it's not really easy, but I think it's easier to build an archives now rather than building a snowman. So there you go. Let's begin building archives, and let's begin building archives for the future. And thank you so much. These are the references, so I think this will be really helpful for you. If you have, again, if you have questions regarding how to build or create an archives, or if you would like um, um, more discourses with me regarding archives and the importance of it, you can always send me an email. So thank you once again, and I hope you're okay. And I hope you learned something from my presentation this morning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the very informative, and if I may use the word of our attendee, captivating talk, Doc Ira. So I believe we have gained so much knowledge from the discussion. Thank you so much, Ma'am Ira, for concising your 6-unit course into an hour, more than an hour of talk. And I would just like to reiterate what Doc Ira said. So archives, usually ang alam natin archives are, ang unang pumapasok is old, no? But as Ma'am Ira said, archives do not pertain to old and unused documents. Okay? So in establishing an archive, we need to start first by identifying our goal. So what would be our goal in establishing an archive? As Doc Ira said, we are creating something that we want to share to future generations. So what do we want to share with them? And in identifying our goal, we have to look into our goals, our institutional goals, our mandates, and our administrative considerations. Okay? So also in establishing an archive, the materials will undergo the same process that we do in processing our library materials. No? Kung napansin niyo po. Plus, we have to establish also preservation and restoration plans. So, Doc Ira said that preventive measures are way cheaper than restorative measures. Hence, let me borrow again Doc Ira's words, when in doubt, ask an expert. Okay, so Doc Ira, ready na ba tayo sa Q&A?
Ready na po.
Ayan, so, okay, so, before Ma'am Ira start answering the questions, I would just like to inform everyone that, as mentioned a while back, this webinar is recorded and the recorded video will be sent to your emails. Okay? So first question, Doc Ira, from Jeffrix Rodriguez. Sabi po niya, good morning, Doc Ira. Our institution just started its operation 2 years ago. As a newly opened educational institution, serving college and senior high school students, what could you suggest for us as starters to collect as our initial collections if we are going to put up an archival section in our library? Inda po.
Hello. So good morning once again. So I think the question here is that I think you want to establish a school archive for serving college and SHS students. Okay. So my suggestion would be, I think you can do a focus group discussion first. Like you will be speaking with your colleagues and other members of your school, so you can do a bit of a survey whether you will be collecting this type of material or not. So from there you can get suggestions from the people in your institution for the collections you want to put in your archives. And if you're looking for the actual topic, like the actual topic that you want to cover in your institutional or school archives, I guess the first thing that you have to consider is the history, the history of your institution first, and then look at the organizational chart of your school and see the different offices or the important offices that you think can deposit or give records to your archive. So you can start from there. You can start like tracing the history, like creating a timeline, look at your organizational chart, and of course your organizational goal. And I think you can start from there. So with those materials on hand, that plus the focus group discussion or your discussion with your colleagues, I think you can start coming up with a core collection for the school archives. So yeah.
Hi, thank you so much. I hope Doc Ira was able to answer your question, Sir Jeffrix. Okay, so next question, Doc Ira from Sir Jeric Oyami. Is digitizing can be used as preservation technique, and does digitized records has minimal value than the original?
All right. So we're talking about digitization here. First thing that you have to understand is digitization is different from digital preservation. So this is another topic. So probably the OST would want to cover that in the future. But yeah, okay, let me put it this way. We have different schools of thought in archiving. Some believe that digitization is a form of preservation, and some believe that digitization is a form of providing access. So it's up to you where you would like to stand. If you'd like to stand as someone who would be digitizing collection for access, or if you'd like to stand as someone who will be digitizing collection as a form of preservation. So it's really up to you. Of course, the question here, does do digitized records have minimal value than the original? So it will really depend on who you will ask. Of course, for some, they would think that it's okay. A digitized record can be a replacement, can be a total replacement of the original. But for some, if you ask historians, for example, or some scholars and researchers, they would think that no, it would be a bit different, because when we use records, we're not just looking at the content or the information, but we also study the materiality of a certain record. So that whether it's digitized or whether it's an analog record, so maybe that would have some effect on the data or on the information that they're trying to gather or capture. So I cannot really answer this one, because it depends on the framework or the lens, or even the theoretical lens that you're using when you are dealing with digital and analog or original records. But another thing is that there are certain restrictions that, especially in the government, that we need to know, and we also need to take into consideration when we're dealing with digitized or digital records, because there are some protocols, there are some policies that limit our use of digital records or digitized records, right? So for instance, we want to submit an electronic record, but in some protocols, in some policies that we have in our institutions, we were asked to print out still the digital record for you to sign or for you to certify. So there are certain limitations. So I think that the question whether the digitized record or the born digital record has a minimal value than the original would really depend on the context and the policy or the governing policies that are surrounding the use and the creation of these records.
I thank you, Doc Ira. And to share, for the Department of Science and Technology, Science and Technology Information Institute, we actually started digitizing our collection. And yes, as Doc Ira said, we need to consider if the material can be digitized or not. So we base this by reading the copyright page of the material. So may mga books po or materials na nakalagay po doon that they cannot be digitized. So we do not include them as part of our digitization process. So we have to check first if the material can be digitized, and if the material has already exceeded its ano pong tawag natin doon, the 50-year the retention. Yan. So, and also, yes, we also consider digitization as part of our preservation technique, especially with the records of the institute and for the DOST as a whole, because we want to add them in our or as part of our archival records also. Okay. Doc Ira, next question. We have here from Ma'am Rosa Salvacion Bombales. Can you suggest an open source database that can be used in digitization of library materials?
That's beyond the scope of my lecture this morning, but yes, I've answered that. Okay. Yeah, so open source database that can be used in digitization. Again, you have to decide whether you are digitizing or you will be doing digital preservation. Because those two things are quite different, because when you're digitizing materials, you are transforming an analog material, or let's say a paper-based material, to a digital format. And then when you're saying that digital preservation, you are digitally preserving preserving a digital object and all its aspects. Okay. So these two are different. So if you're looking for an open source database, so would it be a database for like an exhibition or something that would display your collection? Then I've used Omeka. Based on experience, we use Omeka. So that's an open source database that could display your digitized materials. But for digital preservation, that's another thing because we have other requirements for that.
Yeah. So, okay. So again, Ma'am Rosa, we have to identify what database do we really want to have.
And also your purpose. So would you like just to have a database for storage, just to store your digitized library materials? And also, what kind of library materials do you plan to digitize? After digitizing them, do you plan to keep them for so long, or do you want to step a little further and do digital preservation? So it's really up to you. But then again, if you just want to display, have an exhibit, like an online exhibit of what you have in your archive or in your library, then perhaps you can use Omeka. It's quite user friendly.
Yes. Okay. So also to add, we also have we have a library system in STII where we also upload the digitized library materials. But these uploaded digitized materials are restricted. That means it cannot be downloaded by clients, but we can send that through email. Yun po. Okay, next one, Doc Ira from Joliet Olivar. How much are the cost of materials for preservation, and is it available in the Philippines?
Allah. For the cost, okay, because we purchased a long time ago, so
The basic ones.
yeah, during that time, there was only one supplier, like a middleman, that was actually selling archival supplies. I'm sure those who are working the archives and libraries who are purchasing archival supplies, you already know who this person is. So, siguro just to give you some figures, kunwari one roll of Mylar sheets, Mylar for encapsulation, it will cost you more than 30,000 pesos. So yeah, and for the acidification spray, per spray, I think it was 4,000 pesos. So it actually costs a lot. So that's why in the very beginning, you really have to know your purpose, why you are preserving, or why you are doing this conservation techniques, because it will take a lot of effort and money also to do this preservation things. But of course, marami tayong mga tipid moments, no? So we actually mixed our own acidification solution. We did our own cellulose paste for mending and for sizing and lining. So you can also do that. But again, you should ask some advice from the experts or the actual practitioners of conservation. And always remember that whenever you do any preservation or conservation technique, it should be reversible. That's a very important archival principle in conservation and preservation, that all the things that you do in the archive should be reversible. When you do it, pwede mo siyang gawin. So if you staple your archival materials, do you think it's reversible? Parang hindi, because it will leave what? Holes on the paper, right? So if you deleted something, is it reversible? If you deleted your digital copy, is it reversible? Can you still look it up in the recycle bin or what? So yeah, so you should always remember that.
Ayan, so thank you, Doc Ira. Okay, so ayan, since wala pa yata masyado nagbebenta, no, for in the Philippines sa mga preservation materials, although I think the non-acidic bond papers can be found here in the Philippines. Opo. Ayan.
One suggestion that I can give is that you can collaborate with other archives and other libraries so that you can purchase by bulk, and that would be cheaper. So we also did that. Meron kaming sasabayan, for example, na one library or one project, one existing project, and then we would ask them, are you going to buy this materials? Can we pasabay? So like years ago, sa puso na yung pasabay.
Oh,
And then we can ask, yeah,
okay.
we can also ask them for the lowest rate so that we can compare. So yeah, as an archivist, you should be a good manager and a financial officer then, because yeah, you should really do a lot of budgeting, especially if you have limited funds.
Okay, so, okay, thank you. And then last but not the least question, Doc Ira, Ma'am Maria Victoria Soriano is asking how the chemical used in archiving are harmful. How harmful the chemical materials are.
What kind of chemicals?
Well,
It depends on the chemicals, of course, but there are chemicals that are helpful for the archives, but there are some that are not okay. So yeah, it depends on the chemicals.
okay. Doc Ira, would it be or what would be preferable to use for gloves? Okay na po ba yung surgical gloves when you are dealing with this type of chemicals being used in preservation?
Okay. When you're using chemicals, of course, you have to protect your hands. So you can use surgical gloves, they're okay. But when you're handling fragile materials, there are some literature and guidelines that say that it's not safe to use surgical gloves or even cotton gloves when you're handling archival materials because they can cause friction and things like that. But for me personally, it's better to be safe than sorry, especially if you have oily hands. You don't know, right? I mean, sometimes you, after eating your lunch, then you go to your conservation laboratory and then start conserving. But I think surgical gloves will be okay as long as you are replacing them whenever they get dirty, or you can also use cotton gloves as long as the cotton gloves are not causing static, especially with photographs, because when you're holding photographs, it causes some static.
Okay. There are other questions that came in. Okay. From another one from Ma'am Maria. How long will it affect if we put chemical for the documents? Chemicals.
Yeah, I wonder what kind of chemicals are you referring to? What kind of chemicals?
Ma'am Maria, would you like to specify what type of chemical are you referring to? Hi, so while waiting for Ma'am Maria, let's move on to Ma'am Kathy's question. She's asking if can we put the weeded books in the archives collection since some teachers are still using the outdated books.
What did I say? Okay. Yeah. So I guess you can have a stacks room. I think in the libraries we have a stacks room or a stacks area where you can put outdated library materials. So yeah, maybe if you really don't have a space for that, yeah, you can accommodate them in the archives for a year. No kidding. Because at some point you really need to set your ground. Like the archive should not be a place for weeded materials or unwanted materials. Because if you keep on accepting unwanted materials or old materials in the archives or something that other offices do not want to take in their office, so the cycle will not stop. So
okay. Okay, so thank you, Doc Ira. So indeed, especially for those in the academe, usually akala nila yung library is storage area ng weeded books, right? So we have to assert also and explain the purpose of having a library in the academe or in the institution. So again, as Doc Ira said, we can establish a storage area for weeded books or for outdated books so that we can still access them if they are needed or they are being borrowed. Okay,
Can
next.
I add something? But
Yes, ma'am.
if these books are published by the institution, then you can keep them. For example, you are building or you are working in institutional archives, and that institution has its own publications. So those kinds of materials could be included in the archives. But do not treat them as weeded out materials or outdated materials, because if you label them as such, that only gives everyone an impression of what kind of value you are putting in your materials. Okay, and these are your own publications, so it's only rightful that you should be including them in your archives, or even you can set up your own library for that.
Okay, so next one, this is also related to databases. Ma'am Gay Reyes is asking if there are special databases for keeping records apart from the usual library databases.
Oh yes. Again, I think there should be a separate one, because they perform different functions, especially if you are keeping archival materials for, let's say you'd like to display a certain archival material, like, oh, this is the manuscript of the month. So it performs a different function compared to a library database, wherein you are listing down, or you provide bibliographic descriptions and location of your library collection. So yeah, there should be, and I think for administrative records, so that should also have a different database or a system, like a document tracking system, because again, that database or that system performs a different function. So if you have questions for records management, I think you have a session on that. So you can ask the speaker about records management.
Yes. Okay, so thank you, Ma'am Ira, for extending your expertise. Okay, another question from Sir Migo Jose. He is asking if sabi niya, the archive's roles and responsibilities are now expanded. What do you mean, Sir Migo? The archive's roles and responsibilities are now expanded.
No, expand. Is it a question or a comment?
Oh nga. But he placed a question mark, but maybe
Well, I think he's just affirming what I was trying to say during the presentation, that our archival function and our role in the archives goes beyond the walls of our institution, goes beyond the walls of our schools, because whatever you're keeping in the archives, you don't know the possible use or the potential use of your collection for other people. So you should have that kind of mindset, so that I think you can be more inspired to do your archival work, because you know that you are somehow doing you are doing a great responsibility, of course, for not just for your institution, but for the entire society as well. So that's why I think that's his point, right? Like, our responsibilities have expanded.
okay. So last two questions. Okay. We will go back to Miss Maria Victoria Soriano about the chemicals. So Ma'am Maria said that she is not aware on the chemicals, but what Ma'am Ira recommended, what you recommended, Doc? Ano daw po yung mga harmful, and how long will it take? Years?
Well, I cannot compute the actual number of years of exposure, but again, prevention is better than cure, right? And preservation is cheaper and easier to do than actual restoration. So if you think that a chemical is harmful to people, then do not expose your materials to that. Well, except for alcohol. Of course, alcohol, you think it's not harmful to you, but as much as possible, do not expose, especially your paper-based materials with alcohol. But sometimes we do use a little bit of alcohol and acetone for testing the ink solubility. For example, you have a very old manuscript, so you don't know if you can clean it using water or you can just do dry cleaning. But of course, you have to do ink solubility test. So we use a bit of alcohol and acetone, but not so much. Okay, so you do everything in moderation and lesser intervention as possible. If you are not a conservator, do not touch any chemicals yet. Please do some research and ask advice from the practitioners and from the experts.
Okay. So, and final question, Doc Ira, does the Data Privacy Act affect access policies of archives?
Yes, yes, yes. So please review the Data Privacy Act of 2012. Is it? Yeah, I think it's 2012. So please be guided by the stipulations of that Data Privacy Act, and also especially when you're accepting donations from, let's say, family archives that will be deposited to your archives. Make sure that the donor agreements between you and the family are clear, and take into consideration the restrictions that they are setting. For example, they don't want this series of records or this box of records to be opened in 10 years. Or if this will be opened before 10 years, you have to seek permission from the donating family. And also if you are gathering records, especially in records management, you're dealing with active records, or we're stepping a bit here. If you're gathering records, active records, and then they contain personal information, yeah, you have to take into consideration the Data Privacy Act.
Okay, thank you so much, Doc Ira. Thank you also for answering those questions, even if they are not part of your topic.
Okay.
So, okay, if there are other questions, you can just chat through our Facebook page, and we will be getting back to you soon. Kasi lumampas na po tayo ng oras.
There's one question. Can I answer this one? Sorry. Just one last question.
Yes, yes.
Will UPS Elias offer archival course anytime soon? So there's a question here from a participant. So yes. Actually, we're currently offering courses in the undergraduate level and in the graduate level. So BLIS, MLIS, we're offering archival courses, like 12 units. Is it 12 or 9? Anyway, but we have actually courses in the BLIS and MLIS, and we will be offering a separate Master of Archives and Records Management very, very soon. So please watch out for that, because I think based on my research, it is going to be the first MARM course in Southeast Asia, because in other countries, they're offering like a mixture of document management system, bachelor of, but this master's course will be solely dedicated to archives and records management and archival studies. So please watch out for that. We're really working on it. Yeah, so I'm one of the people who are really pushing for that, and I'm really happy because the UPS Elias is very supportive, and they're very proactive with the archival education and training of all the Filipino librarians and those who are aspiring to become archivists and records managers, probably in the near future. So please watch out for our announcements. So we're working hard on it. Yeah, so we're all in this together. I know that you're excited. So hopefully if we're going to release our new program, I hope to see your names on the list of applicants. So there you go.
Okay, thank you, Doc Ira. And Doc, do you have can you share us your contact details if there are those attendees that needs or who wanted to get in touch with you?
Yes, it's actually in this slide. So those who are asking for my contact details, it's in this slide. So, but you can send me an email at ira@slis.upd.edu.ph. So it's very easy to remember, just my name, Ira, I-Y-R-A. So just do not misspell my name. So that's it. You can easily remember it. You can send me an email anytime.
Okay, thank you, Doc Ira. So now let us proceed to the virtual awarding of the certificate to our resource speaker. And this will be awarded by our supervising science research specialist, Ms. Linderlit M. Maglake.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Ma'am Ira.
Hello, good morning.
So, in behalf of the Department of Science and Technology Information Institute, we would like to present the Certificate of Appreciation to Dr. Ira S. Buenrostro Cabab for being our resource speaker in the webinar entitled, Do You Want to Build an Archives? Di ko makanta. So, do you want to build an archives? An introduction to core archival function. So given this 10th day of November 2020 via Zoom, signed by our Director Richard P. Burgos. So given today, so Ma'am Ira, thank you very much for that knowledge and learning. So sana po maulit, Ma'am.
Okay po.
Wag po kayong madala, Ma'am.
Hindi naman, kayo naman.
So thank you very much, ma'am. So also, syempre makakalimutan ba natin ang ating mga participants? So we would also like to present the certificate of participation to all of our participants for this day for being participated in the webinar entitled, Do you want to build an archives? An introduction to core archival functions given this 10th day of November 2020 via Zoom, signed by our Director Richard P. Burgos. So congratulations po sa lahat, and then also thank you po sa pag-attend nyo today. So sana po later, this afternoon, after 2 p.m., so sana po mag-join po ulit kayo sa another session for our PM session. So again, once again, Ma'am Ira, thank you very much.
Salamat po.
Okay, thank you so much, Ma'am Linder. And again, thank you, Doc Ira. We will now proceed to the evaluation form. So the link is posted or shown in your screen. Okay, so remember the link and the webinar code. Okay, you can screenshot po so that you can answer this later. So those who will be answering the evaluation form will be given an e-certificate. Right? So again, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We hope to see you this afternoon at 2 p.m. We will encourage you to tune in our FB Live. So shout out sa aming mga viewers and sa ating mga Zoom participants. You can, we would request or maybe advise you to get in the room 30 minutes before 2 p.m. Okay? So, sa nagtatanong po, if we have the same topic for this afternoon, magkaiba po. So this afternoon, we will be talking about gender sensitivity for librarians, since I believe GAD has also already been incorporated in our curriculum and also in our deliverables for those who are in the government offices. No? Okay, so again, thank you so much everyone and have a great day ahead.